In the 6th of February 2014, 5 friends drove for 3 days across Finland and Sweden to reach a cave in Norway. They were excited. They had planned this trip for months. They had the right equipment, the right experience, the right route. Everything was right. By the time they reached the exit, 2 of them were dead. 1 had been left behind in the dark, and the 3 survivors had each done something that no amount of training prepares a human being for. They had found a body underwater in complete darkness, and they had to decide in the next 30 seconds, with limited oxygen, whether to swim past it or turn around and die. Plura Cave sits in northern Norway. The entire system is flooded, every inch of it. There is no walking in, looking around, and walking out. To explore Plura, you enter through an opening at the bottom of a pond and swim for 2 kilometers through flooded passages, 100 meters underground, in water that sits just above freezing, in darkness so complete that without your light, you cannot see your hand touching your own face. The route had been done before. It was considered challenging but achievable for experienced cave divers. The 5 friends who arrived that February were not beginners. 4 of them were highly experienced. 2 had been inside Plura before. They had done everything right, which is the most terrifying part of everything that follows. They entered the cave at 8 a.m. The plan was simple. Swim 2 kilometers through the flooded system. Surface at the exit on the other side. Estimated time, 5 hours. 5 hours underwater in freezing darkness. In any sane world, that sounds like an insane plan. In cave diving, it is considered routine. For the first hour, everything went exactly as expected. Cold, dark, tight passages. The specific silence of being deep underwater inside rock, but manageable. Then, one of the divers needed to change his oxygen tank. A routine procedure. Something every cave diver trains for repeatedly. He reached for his backup tank. The tubing caught on his equipment. He could not detach it cleanly. He worked at it. 30 seconds. A minute. The tubing would not release. He kept working. And then, before his teammates could reach him, he went still. He had run out of breathable air before he could complete the switch. He was dead. 1 kilometer from the entrance. 1 kilometer from the exit. Perfectly in the middle of nowhere. His 4 teammates were now inside a flooded cave in Norway with a dead friend and a decision. Turn back 1 kilometer through freezing darkness back to the entrance. Continue forward 1 kilometer through freezing darkness to the exit. Both options the same distance. Both options through the same blackness. They chose forward, because that is what the training says. Commit to your direction. Do not waste oxygen reversing. Keep moving. They left their friend in the dark, and they kept swimming. For the next hour, the 4 remaining divers moved through the passage. Cold, focused, processing grief underwater in real time while managing oxygen levels and navigation. The passage narrowed, then opened, then narrowed again. Standard Plura geography, and then around a bend in the passage. Their lights hit something, floating in the water ahead of them. Something that was not rock, not equipment, not anything that should be inside this cave. A body, a human body, suspended in the water, blocking the passage, arms slightly raised by the current, not their friend. This person had been here before them. For how long, nobody knew. Now pause for a second, because I need you to understand the specific situation these 4 people were now in. They were 100 meters underground, completely flooded passage in every direction, water temperature just above freezing, limited oxygen that was being consumed faster by the physical and psychological stress they were already under. They could not go around. The passage walls on both sides pressed close. The body was directly in their path. They had approximately 30 seconds to make a decision before the hesitation alone began costing them oxygen they could not afford to spend. Turn back and face the full 2-kilometer return swim with depleted tanks. Go through past the body, touching it, moving it, getting close enough to feel the current it displaced against your wetsuit, in complete darkness except for the small circle of light from your torch. There was no third option. There is never a third option in cave diving. The first diver went through, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, and that 4th diver, the last one to pass. Something happened at exactly that moment that has never been fully explained in any official account of this incident. Whether it was the physical contact with the body, whether it was the accumulated psychological weight of watching a friend die and then finding a stranger dead in the dark and then having to physically pass through the space a dead person was occupying. The 4th diver began to panic. Real panic. Not elevated stress. Not increased heart rate. The specific neurological event where rational thought stops and the body takes over completely. In cave diving, panic is the last thing that ever happens to a person, because panic consumes oxygen at 3 times the normal rate. Panic causes erratic movement that stirs silt and destroys visibility. Panic makes divers remove their regulators. Panic kills. The fourth diver began producing more carbon dioxide than his equipment could expel. He lost consciousness. He died in the passage. 20 meters past the body, 100 meters underground. In the dark, 40 minutes from the exit. 3 divers remained. 3 people who had entered this cave 5 hours earlier as friends on an adventure, and were now navigating a flooded passage with 2 dead teammates behind them and the growing awareness that their oxygen levels were not guaranteed to last until the exit. They kept swimming, cold, depleted, processing things that the human brain was not designed to process, while simultaneously managing a technical dive in a flooded cave system. They reached the exit passage. Ice. A thick layer of ice had formed across the exit opening during the hours they had been inside. The exit was sealed. They had to break through it with their hands. Cold, bare hands. Against ice. In freezing water. With whatever oxygen remained in their tanks. They broke through. They surfaced. After 11 hours underwater, 3 people climbed out of Plura Cave. The same 3 who had driven across Scandinavia for 3 days. -2. All 3 were hospitalized immediately for severe decompression sickness from the duration of the dive. They spent months recovering. Their friend's body, the one who died changing his tank, was still inside the cave. The unknown body was still inside the cave. Rescue teams could not safely recover either of them. Here is the part of this story that most people never hear. The survivors came back, months later, after recovering from decompression sickness. After processing what had happened, they went back to Plura Cave, without telling Norwegian police, because their friend was still inside. After a 5-day operation, they recovered his body. They brought him home. The unknown body in the passage had been there for a long time before February 2014. Another cave diver, another expedition, another wrong decision in the dark. Nobody had been able to reach them either, which means for an unknown period of time before that February morning, someone's family had been wondering where their person was. While that person was floating in a flooded passage in Norway, 100 meters underground, in the dark, waiting to be found by strangers who would have to decide in 30 seconds whether to swim past them or turn back and die. Plura Cave is still open. Experienced divers still enter it, knowing the history, knowing what floats in those passages, knowing that 5 hours of routine can become 11 hours of survival in the time it takes a regulator tube to catch on a buckle. They go anyway, because cave divers are a specific kind of person, the kind who looks at a flooded passage in Norway in February and thinks that sounds manageable. The rest of us will take their word for it. From here, on the surface, where the air is free and unlimited and requires absolutely no equipment to access. This is Vorin. Every story on this channel is real. Every name is documented. Every detail happened exactly as described. Subscribe, because next week we go inside the cave where one man survived alone on a tiny underground island for 6 weeks. And what he wrote in the sand before the end. That story is already waiting.